The photograph arrived in an old, dust-covered envelope. Its edges were frayed, the paper yellowed with age, but the image itself was startlingly clear. A group of children, all lined up in rigid rows outside a modest brick schoolhouse, posed for the camera. Their smiles were forced, their eyes wide and bright. It looked ordinary, almost nostalgic. Except it shouldn't have existed. The year was 1899. The school where the children supposedly studied had been destroyed in a fire 10 years earlier. Records showed it had been rebuilt in 1905. Teachers, students, even the principal, every official record confirmed that no photographs had been taken before the fire. And yet here it was, a perfectly preserved, sepia-toned image of a school that never existed at the time. At first, historians dismissed it. Perhaps it was mislabeled. Perhaps it was a later reconstruction. But then, someone noticed the details. The shadows cast by the children didn't match the sun's angle for that season. One boy near the center held a book that wouldn't be published for another 7 years. And in the back row, a girl's face seemed almost too real, too aware. Zooming in, the archivist noticed something even more chilling. Behind the group, in the corner of the frame, a figure stood apart, tall, shadowed, featureless, but unmistakably present. It wasn't listed in any record, no one claimed it, and yet it was clearly captured watching, waiting. The longer you look, the more it feels as if the photograph itself resists explanation. Like the image is aware of your gaze, like it's warning you to step back, to stop questioning. But curiosity, of course, cannot be denied. Because this photograph is not just a picture, it is a mystery frozen in time. And the more we study it, the more disturbing it becomes. The screen flickers to black. A faint static hum fills the silence, broken only by a soft, deliberate voice. You're watching Truth Uncaged. It begins, low and measured, where forgotten photographs speak louder than words, and the past refuses to stay buried. The 1899 school photo fades onto the screen again. At first glance, it seems ordinary. Rows of children, a brick schoolhouse, the harsh sunlight of a late summer day. But then the voice slows. Look closer. Notice the shadows. The boy holding a book that wasn't published for years. The girl in the back row. And the figure standing apart watching. A pause. The static hum grows slightly louder, like a heartbeat trapped in the walls. History says this photograph shouldn't exist. Records prove the school was destroyed years before this was supposedly taken, and yet, here it is, preserved, defiant, haunting. The voice leans closer to a whisper. Before we dive deeper, look at it yourself. Examine the faces, examine the shadows. Tell us in the comments, what do you see? What feels wrong? The screen darkens again, leaving only the photograph's ghostly outline. The voice continues. Because by the time this story unfolds, you may wish you hadn't looked so closely. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, and some eyes, once captured, never truly close. A soft crackle of static lingers. Then slowly, the screen brightens, revealing the schoolhouse in all its quiet, unsettling detail. Now, the voice says, let's step back into 1899 and uncover a story that was never supposed to exist. The year was 1899. The town of Greystone was small, quiet, and easily forgotten. Brick-paved streets wound between low, soot-stained buildings, and the smell of coal fires lingered in the crisp autumn air. Children ran along narrow alleys, their laughter carrying faintly over the clatter of horse-drawn carts. But beneath the charm, something about the town felt suspended, as if it existed slightly out of time. The school at the center of Greystone had once been the pride of the community. Teachers spoke of strict rules, polished floors, and mornings filled with reading and arithmetic. Families trusted it with their children, believing the building and its lessons were solid, unchanging. That is, until the fire came. In the archives, local newspapers described the blaze in vivid detail, flames consuming the wooden beams, smoke billowing across the town, screams echoing into the night. The fire destroyed everything, desks, books, and student records, leaving only charred remnants of what had once been. Greystone mourned, then rebuilt, but decades later, no one could explain why a photograph claiming to show the school in 1899 existed. It was in this town that a young photographer, Elias Crowley, worked quietly, documenting life and capturing images of children in classrooms and playgrounds. His work was meticulous, almost ritualistic. Every exposure is carefully considered, every shadow examined. The photograph in question, rows of children lined up outside the schoolhouse, bore none of the fire's destruction. Every brick intact, every child posed as if nothing had ever gone wrong. And yet, something about the scene felt off, a subtle dissonance that suggested this moment was not meant to exist, that the town's history itself had been quiet, rewritten. As we peer closer, it becomes clear the photograph is more than a record of a day. It is a doorway, a question, a whisper from a time that refuses to remain forgotten. At first, the photograph seemed like a simple historical curiosity, a school portrait from the past. Rows of children neatly dressed, their small shoes perfectly aligned on the brick steps, a teacher standing sternly at the side. Yet, as historians and archivists examined it more closely, subtle anomalies began to emerge. The first clue came from the shadows. Sunlight fell unevenly, casting angles that made no sense given the season or time of day. A shadow behind one of the children extended far longer than it should have. It almost seemed intentional, as if it were placed there to draw attention or perhaps to hide something. Then came the books. One boy in the second row clutched a textbook that, according to publishing records, would not exist for another 7 years. Another child held a notebook stamped with a logo from a stationery company that would only open decades later. Scholars puzzled, flipping through records trying to reconcile the timeline. Nothing matched, and finally the eyes. The girl in the back row, small, pale, with a bow in her hair, seemed different from the others. Her gaze was unnervingly direct, locking onto the camera as though she understood more than anyone else in the room. Some said her expression carried knowledge or even warning. A faint figure also appeared at the far edge of the frame, partially obscured by the schoolhouse wall. Featureless yet unmistakably humanoid, the archivist who first noticed it described a chill running down his spine, a sudden drop in temperature as he leaned closer. It wasn't a trick of the lens, he said later. It was as if someone, or something, wanted to be seen. By the time the photograph reached the digital restoration team, minor scratches and grainy artifacts revealed themselves as deliberate marks, almost like hidden signatures. Tiny scratches formed patterns resembling letters, too faint to read at first, and though no one could decipher them completely, a single thought persisted among all who studied the image. This photograph was not meant to exist. It was more than a record. It was a message, and for anyone who dared to look, it whispered one undeniable truth. History sometimes hides its secrets in plain sight. Once the anomalies were noticed, the photograph became the subject of an obsessive investigation. Historians, archivists, and amateur detectives all gathered to understand why this school portrait defied every record. The first step was verifying the location. Greystone, long rebuilt, was combed for remnants of the original schoolhouse. Foundations were excavated, maps compared, and yet nothing matched the image. It was as if the photograph depicted a school that never stood in reality. Next, attention turned to the children. Names were scoured from census records, birth certificates, and family trees. Most matched, or at least appeared plausible for the era. But one girl in the back row remained unidentified. Every search, every inquiry hit a dead end. It was as if she had never existed. Worse, some claimed that descendants of other children reported that a girl matching her description had disappeared mysteriously around that time. Photographic experts examined the image itself. They noted irregularities in the emulsion and inconsistencies in the shadows. Tiny marks in the corners resembled faint fingerprints, but they did not match the children, the photographer, or anyone in the archival team. It was as if a third presence had pressed itself onto the photograph. Paranormal investigators were eventually consulted. Some argued that the image captured more than light, that it somehow trapped a consciousness or an essence of someone or something present during the moment. Others refused to speak of it publicly, claiming it had a way of affecting those who lingered too long before it. A single account described a feeling of cold, as if unseen eyes followed them, while others swore the girl in the back row seemed to shift her gaze imperceptibly but unmistakably. Journalists and researchers began documenting every anomaly, every inconsistency, trying to piece together a coherent narrative. Yet each answer seemed to raise more questions. Who was the girl? Why did the photograph exist if the school had been destroyed? And what force, unseen and deliberate, had made itself present on that single sepia image? The investigation had begun, but already those involved sensed they were chasing something far beyond the normal bounds of history or photography. Something that refused to be explained. Because the 1899 school photo was not just a record of children at play. It was a puzzle, a warning, and perhaps a trapped fragment of something that should have stayed buried. Weeks into the investigation, the team made a discovery that sent chills through everyone involved. High-resolution scans revealed tiny anomalies in the children's eyes. Most of the pupils reflected normal light. But the girl in the back row, the one no records could account for, had an impossible reflection. It wasn't the camera, nor the sky, nor any known object. It was something else entirely, a faint, shadowed figure hovering just behind her, almost imperceptible yet undeniably present. Experts ran every test imaginable. Ultraviolet light, infrared scans, chemical analysis of the emulsion. Nothing explained the anomaly. Every result pointed to one undeniable truth. The figure had been there when the photo was taken, yet no one alive could identify it. The archivists whispered of something watching, a presence that seemed woven into the very fabric of the photograph. Then came the personal accounts. A descendant of one child in the photo reported recurring nightmares. A small girl, pale with an eerie awareness in her eyes, standing silently in hallways, always just out of reach. Another witness, a retired historian who had studied the image for decades, admitted to hearing faint, childlike whispers whenever he examined the print late at night. But the most unsettling evidence came from digital enhancement. Zooming in on the background, tiny scratches and marks revealed themselves as intentional, almost like a hidden signature or message. Letters could be made out in fragments. Look, not safe, do not trust. They were incomplete, but the intent was unmistakable. Someone or something had wanted the photograph to be seen, but also to warn. The implications were terrifying. If the photograph was merely a record of children, these anomalies would not exist. Yet here they were. An unidentifiable girl, shadowed figures, cryptic scratches, and an impossible reflection. The photograph seemed to exist in defiance of history, physics, and reason. And yet, the more the investigators looked, the more it became clear. This was no ordinary photograph. It was a doorway, a trap, a puzzle left behind by forces that did not belong to this world. Because sometimes the simplest images, rows of children in front of a school, carry the heaviest secrets, and the 1899 school photo had secrets waiting to be unearthed. By the time the photograph had reached the wider public, the investigation had taken on a life of its own. Social media and historical forums buzzed with theories, some rational, some bordering on the fantastical. But those closest to the photograph reported that the more people studied it, the stranger things became. Shadows seemed to shift when unobserved. Reflections in the children's eyes appeared to move subtly, and the girl in the back row seemed to follow viewers across the frame. Even when seen on a screen, the team began noticing a pattern. Every person who spent extended time with the image reported disorientation and unease, sometimes lasting hours or days. Archivists described headaches, chills, and a sensation of being watched. One member swore he saw faint movements in the background when no one else was in the room. A fleeting figure that vanished the moment he blinked. Then, the most disturbing twist, historical records surfaced that contradicted themselves. Some students listed in the photograph had actually been documented as absent that year, some attending schools miles away. Even stranger, the names of the unidentifiable girl did not appear in any registry, census, or birth record. It was as if she had been deliberately erased from existence, yet captured on film. Digital forensic experts noted something almost impossible. subtle changes between early prints of the photograph. Tiny details, barely noticeable, seem to shift between versions. The angle of a shadow, the placement of the girl's hands, even her gaze. Was this the result of human error, or was the photograph itself somehow alive, adjusting, reacting? Rumors of curses and hauntings began circulating. Locals claimed that descendants of the children featured in the photo had experienced unexplained disappearances, faint voices in empty rooms, or the feeling of being followed. Even the most skeptical investigators admitted a creeping sense of dread, a persistent question. Had they uncovered a historical anomaly, or had they stumbled into something far darker? The photograph no longer seemed static. It was an evolving puzzle, a mystery refusing to yield its secrets. And the more they tried to control it, the more it controlled them, guiding, warning, and perhaps even judging those who dared to look too long. Because some moments captured on film are not merely memories. They are warnings from the past, waiting patiently for someone to notice. Decades passed, but the photograph refused to fade into obscurity. Museums, private collectors, and online archives all attempted to preserve it. Yet each encounter seemed to magnify its mystery. Scholars debated its authenticity, while paranormal enthusiasts claimed that the image exerted a subtle influence over anyone who lingered too long. The photograph had become more than a historical artifact. It was a legend, a story whispered in academic circles and shadowed corners of the internet. Modern technology offered new insights, yet only deepened the unease. Advanced digital enhancement revealed hidden marks along the edges, almost like faint fingerprints pressed deliberately into the negative. Tiny symbols, invisible to the naked eye, suggested intentional manipulation, as if the photograph itself had been created not just to depict, but to communicate. Some believed these symbols were a warning, others claimed they were a signature of the unseen figure that haunted the image. Interviews with descendants of the children in the photograph revealed chilling patterns. Some reported recurring dreams of the girl in the back row, her gaze following them through their lives. Others spoke of fleeting glimpses in mirrors, shadows that mirrored her form, or the faint sound of whispered names in empty houses. It became clear the photograph had extended its reach across time, influencing the lives of those connected to it. Documentaries, books, and online investigations attempted to reconstruct the truth. But every theory raised new questions. Was the girl a forgotten child erased from history, or was she something else entirely? A presence trapped in the photograph, a warning left for the future. Historians acknowledge the unexplainable anomalies, shadows misaligned with natural light, impossible reflections in the children's eyes, subtle movements between different prints. The photograph had become a touchstone for those seeking answers. It forced the world to confront uncomfortable questions about time, memory, and the limits of reality. For anyone who studied it, the legacy was the same: unease, fascination, and the haunting knowledge that some moments captured on film are never truly gone. And perhaps the most terrifying lesson of all, the past is never fully silent. It watches, it waits, and sometimes it reaches out through a photograph, a shadow, a pair of unblinking eyes, reminding us that some stories were never meant to be forgotten. As we step back from the 1899 school photograph, its weight becomes undeniable. At first glance, it seems innocent. Children lined up, a schoolhouse behind them, a moment frozen in time. But closer examination reveals a truth far darker, a truth about memory, history, and the unseen forces that sometimes linger in the spaces we believe are safe. The girl in the back row, unaccounted for in any record, embodies more than a mystery. She represents the limits of what we can know, the parts of history that refuse to be explained, and the moments that can evade documentation even as they leave traces. Her gaze, unyielding and aware, serves as a reminder. Some stories demand attention, and some secrets will not remain hidden. For the descendants of the children, the photograph is a legacy of unease. It is a warning that history is not always neat or complete. Shadows linger in the corners, Gaps exist in records, and sometimes reality bends in ways that defy logic. The photograph teaches us to look closer, to question what we assume, and to respect the unknown. More broadly, the story forces us to confront a universal truth. Images, though static, can hold more than memory. They can hold fragments of life, echoes of moments that escape documentation, and whispers of truths too complex for words alone. The 1899 school photo is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a lesson in humility, a reminder that the past is alive in ways we cannot always perceive, and that curiosity can reveal both beauty and terror. And so, as we leave this photograph behind, a chilling thought remains. When we peer into the faces of history, when we examine what others might overlook, we are not only witnessing the past, we are inviting it into the present. Some images are meant to be studied, some images are meant to be questioned, and some are meant to haunt us forever. Even now, long after the investigation has ended and the historians have published their reports, the photograph continues to unsettle anyone who dares to look. Digital copies circulate online, yet the unease remains. Some viewers claim they feel the girl's gaze follow them across the screen. Others report an inexplicable chill when they linger too long, a whispering sense that the past is not entirely past. No one has been able to fully explain the anomalies, the impossible shadows, the unidentifiable figure, the subtle movements between prints. Each element defies reason, and yet the photograph endures. It is not simply a record of a forgotten school or of children lined up in rigid rows. It is a fragment of a mystery that refuses to be forgotten, a ghost captured on film, forever poised between history and legend. Some who have studied the image extensively have warned others to proceed with caution. "Do not linger too long," one archivist said in a whispered interview. "It feels alive, not in a literal sense, but in a way that changes you even subtly. When you look too closely, you become part of the story." And perhaps that is the true horror of the 1899 school photograph. It is not the fire, the missing records, or even the unidentifiable girl. It is the way it reaches across decades, tugging at our curiosity, challenging our assumptions, and reminding us that some moments, captured, preserved, and framed, are not meant to be fully understood. As the screen fades to black, one final thought lingers. History is not always neat, time does not always heal, and some images once seen never truly leave us. The 1899 school photograph stands as a warning, a whisper, a question, and for anyone brave and or foolish enough to stare too long, it remains, watching, waiting, and haunting forever.